People often imagine that getting a diagnosis changes your life overnight. They picture some dramatic revelation where everything suddenly becomes clear, every problem is solved, and the future unfolds in perfect order. My experience wasn't anything like that. If anything, the diagnosis only made me realize how confusing the previous 23 years had been. It didn't magically organize my thoughts or teach me how to study. It didn't erase years of frustration or answer every question I had about myself. What it did give me was a name for something I'd spent my entire life blaming on my own character. For 23 years, I believed I simply wasn't disciplined enough. Then someone told me I had ADHD. The strange part was that I didn't believe it at first. How could I? I had finished high school. I had been accepted into university. By the time I was tested, I was already in my third year. That didn't fit the picture I had in my head. ADHD was something I thought was diagnosed in children who couldn't sit still in class. It wasn't supposed to describe someone who had managed to get this far academically. I remember leaving the appointment almost convinced there had been some mistake. Surely I couldn't have lived with ADHD for 23 years without anyone noticing. Looking back now, I think that disbelief came from how little I actually understood the condition. I assumed that success canceled out struggle. If I passed exams, then I couldn't possibly have ADHD. If I graduated high school, then I must have been fine. I didn't realize that reaching those milestones didn't mean the journey had been easy. It just meant I had somehow dragged myself across the finish line every single time, often at the cost of my sleep, my mental health, and my confidence. For as long as I can remember, I felt like everyone else had received instructions for life that I had somehow missed. Simple tasks became complicated. I'd walk into a room and immediately forget why I was there. I'd start cleaning my desk and somehow end up reorganizing old notebooks for an hour without ever finishing what I intended to do. I constantly misplaced my keys, my wallet, my phone, or whatever item I had been holding only moments before. My parents would ask me to do something, and I genuinely intended to do it, but somewhere between hearing the request and acting on it, my mind wandered into a completely different world. The frustrating part was that it never looked intentional. From the outside, it probably seemed like I didn't care. Teachers told me I had potential but needed to apply myself. Family members reminded me to pay attention. Friends joked about how forgetful I was. Eventually, I started repeating those same words to myself: lazy, careless, unmotivated. If enough people describe you that way, eventually you stop questioning it. School became a strange balancing act. Some subjects fascinated me so much that I could spend hours reading about them without realizing time had passed. Other subjects felt impossible to focus on, even when I desperately wanted good grades. I never understood why my brain seemed to choose what it cared about instead of letting me decide. I could memorize random facts from documentaries I'd watched years ago, but forget material I'd studied the night before an exam. Homework was always a battle. I'd tell myself I would start after dinner, then after one episode of a show, then after checking one notification. Suddenly, it was 11 at night, panic would set in, and I'd somehow finish everything in a burst of frantic energy. It happened so consistently that I began believing pressure was simply the only way I could work. While my classmates spread assignments across several days, I compressed everything into the final few hours. I always admired people who could sit down and study for 3 or 4 hours straight. They would create schedules, stick to them, and steadily work through the material. I'd make those same schedules, color code them, decorate them, and genuinely believe this would finally be the week I became organized. The schedule itself looked beautiful. Following it lasted about a day. Every failure made me promise myself I'd try harder next time. I bought planners I barely used, downloaded productivity apps I forgot to open, watched videos about discipline, habits, motivation, and time management. Every solution assumed I simply lacked enough willpower. I believed that too. If everyone else could do it, then surely I just wasn't trying hard enough. Despite all of that, I managed to get decent grades. People saw the results, not the process. They didn't see the nights fueled by anxiety, the assignments started hours before deadlines, or the mental exhaustion that followed every exam period. They saw someone who was doing well enough. Even I ignored the warning signs because the grades looked acceptable. High school ended, and somehow I had exceeded even my own expectations. University felt like proof that maybe I'd finally figured things out. Instead, it magnified every weakness I had spent years hiding. Suddenly, nobody reminded me about deadlines. Nobody structured my day. Lectures demanded sustained attention, assignments overlapped, and every course expected independent organization. The cracks became impossible to ignore. I missed deadlines I had written in 3 different places. I forgot meetings I had genuinely planned to attend. I spent entire afternoons feeling busy without accomplishing anything important. Then I'd work until sunrise trying to catch up. The cycle repeated so often that I couldn't understand why I never seemed to learn from it. The hardest part wasn't the workload, it was comparing myself to everyone around me. Friends complained about studying for 4 hours, while I couldn't manage 20 uninterrupted minutes without fighting my own thoughts. I'd watch someone calmly read through lecture slides while my attention bounced between the text, conversations nearby, a bird outside the window, an unrelated memory from 5 years ago, and a completely random question about something I'd probably search online later. I kept thinking it had to be discipline. It had to be. What else could explain it? Every productivity book told me successful people built habits. Every motivational video insisted consistency was a choice. I chose consistency every morning and somehow lost it by lunchtime. Eventually, after enough frustration, I decided to talk to a professional. I wasn't expecting an ADHD assessment. I honestly thought someone would tell me to sleep more, manage stress better, or stop procrastinating. Instead, after a series of conversations and assessments, I heard the words that completely changed how I viewed my life. You meet the criteria for ADHD. I sat there trying to process it. My first reaction wasn't relief. It was skepticism. I almost wanted to argue. I explained that I had graduated high school and was already in my 3rd year of university. Surely someone with ADHD couldn't have done that. The doctor smiled in a way that suggested he'd heard those exact words many times before. That conversation stayed with me for weeks. As the days passed, I started remembering moments from my childhood differently. Suddenly, every report card mentioning that I was bright but distracted meant something. Every forgotten homework assignment, every unfinished hobby, every time I interrupted someone because I was afraid I'd lose my thought before they finished speaking. Every project that began with overwhelming excitement before slowly disappearing into a pile of abandoned ideas. I remembered cleaning my room by making an even bigger mess because every object reminded me of something else I wanted to do. I remembered reading the same paragraph 5 times because I reached the bottom of the page without absorbing a single word. I remembered walking into exams convinced I wasn't prepared, despite spending entire nights trying to study. None of those memories disappeared after the diagnosis. They simply stopped looking like evidence that I was broken. That didn't mean everything suddenly became easy. Knowing why something happens doesn't automatically stop it from happening. I still forgot things. I still procrastinated. I still became distracted by thoughts that appeared without invitation. The difference was that I stopped interpreting every struggle as a moral failure. The next step was medication. I was hopeful, maybe too hopeful. I'd read stories from people describing it as putting on glasses for the first time. I imagined my thoughts finally lining up neatly. I imagined becoming the disciplined person I'd always wanted to be. The first few days were surprising. My mind became quieter. Tasks seemed easier to begin. I wasn't constantly pulled in 10 directions at once. For the first time, I understood what people meant when they talked about simply deciding to do something and then doing it. Objectively, it worked. But something else happened that I hadn't expected. I didn't quite feel like myself. It wasn't dramatic or frightening. It was subtle, almost impossible to describe. It felt like someone had adjusted the volume of my personality. The thoughts that usually bounced around my head had become quieter, but so had parts of me that I actually liked. I laughed a little less. I felt less spontaneous. Conversations felt more measured. Even though I was more productive, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was acting as a slightly different version of myself. People often assume that if medication helps, the decision is easy. For me, it wasn't. Every day I had to choose between feeling more organized and feeling more familiar. I know medication helps countless people, and I'm genuinely happy it exists. It simply wasn't the right fit for me, at least not in the form I tried. After discussing it with my doctor, I eventually stopped taking it. Some people didn't understand that decision. They asked why I'd stopped something that improved my focus. The answer was simple, even if it sounded strange. I no longer recognized myself. Productivity mattered, but so did feeling like the person I'd known my whole life. Maybe another medication would have been different. Maybe another dosage would have worked better. I haven't ruled out trying again someday. At that moment, though, stepping away felt like the right choice. Today, I still live with ADHD. The diagnosis didn't disappear because I stopped taking medication. Some days are still chaotic. I still forget appointments occasionally. I still lose my phone while it's somehow in my hand. I still have moments where my thoughts scatter faster than I can collect them. The difference is that I understand myself better. When I struggle to begin a task, I don't immediately conclude that I'm lazy. When I lose focus, I don't assume I'm incapable. When I need to approach work differently from someone else, I don't see that as failure. I see it as adaptation. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have looked like if I had been diagnosed as a child. Maybe school would have been easier. Maybe I would have been kinder to myself. Maybe I would have spent less time believing everyone else possessed a level of discipline I simply lacked. But dwelling on that question doesn't change the past. Those 23 years shaped who I became. They taught me persistence, even if it was born from necessity. They taught me empathy because I know what it's like to struggle with something invisible. They taught me that appearances rarely tell the whole story. Someone can earn good grades while silently fighting themselves every single day. If there's one thing I wish I'd understood sooner, it's that succeeding doesn't mean something wasn't difficult. You can cross the finish line while carrying a weight nobody else sees. People celebrate the result without realizing how much energy it took just to arrive there. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out strategies that work for me. Some days I succeed, other days I don't. That's true whether you have ADHD or not. The diagnosis didn't give me a perfect life. It gave me a more honest explanation. Instead of asking myself why I couldn't simply be like everyone else, I finally started asking what I needed in order to thrive as myself. That change in perspective has been worth more than any label. I lived 23 years without knowing why my mind worked the way it did. Now I do. It doesn't excuse every mistake I've made, but it explains many of them. More importantly, it reminds me that understanding yourself is not about finding excuses. It's about replacing unnecessary shame with knowledge, replacing self-hatred with patience, and replacing impossible expectations with realistic ones. My life has always felt a little messy. Maybe it always will. But now, when I look at that mess, I no longer see proof that I failed. I see the path of someone who spent years trying to solve a puzzle without knowing all the pieces existed. Now that I finally have them, the picture isn't perfect, but for the first time, it makes sense.